Hello, my sugar friends. For this video, I decided to do a cake that was a little different. I've been inspired by some natural elements lately, specifically stone. So for this cake, I tried to do a green jade inspired cake. It kind of looks like soapstone and jade at the same time. So let's get started with how I did this. What I'm doing is I'm doing the same technique for the decorations as for the top tier, just in a slightly different way. For the decorations on the front, I am doing smaller chunks, and what I did was I just marbled together 2 shades of green. Actually mint, 2 shades of mint. You could do whatever color you want, but I did the mint. Marble them together lightly. Don't over marble them because you kind of want to get some veining-esque look to it. And leave it in a block shape. I left it to sit for a little while. I'm going to take some time explaining this here. I let it sit for a while so that when I cut it, it didn't flatten. And once I did that, I cut it into those chunks, and I'm just adding, all this is gel food coloring, white gel food coloring. I was inspired by some earrings that I saw people making. I've been watching other forms of art lately and getting really inspired. And these were clay cut earrings that inspired this entire cake. Natural elements and the way they made these earrings. And this white food coloring kind of gives you the look of having some separation between I don't know how they're naturally formed in these stones, but you see kind of that veining, and some of them are more in kind of a irregular shaped pattern. And that's what the food coloring is going to do. Now, if I had had more time, I would have let this sit probably overnight. A good chance overnight, because that food coloring is going to keep it moist or keep it from drying too firm or too crusty. But I had to do it that day, so I let it set for maybe an hour, and then I sliced it, and then I am rolling these pieces together, and what that does is that kind of brings out the marbling a little bit more. It makes it's almost like your cells in the stones. I don't know what it's called. It makes those bigger, the different sections. And I'm using a lot of cornstarch because of the food coloring. It wants to stick to everything. This was an experiment, guys, as are a lot of my cakes. This is an experiment. So I just use a lot of cornstarch to keep the roller from sticking and to keep the fondant from sticking to the mat too much. And then I'm just using different shaped rectangular metal cookie cutters to make these rectangular geometric shapes. And this is where the earring inspiration really kind of formulated on the cake as well. And you'll see I'm going to finish those off. Like you saw in the video at the very beginning, I edged those out with some gold. And that was kind of what the earrings were kind of like. And what I'm doing here is I'm just removing some of that food coloring from the surface. It's going to want to spread on there when you're slicing them, but you can remove it once they are sliced from the surface. And I'm just using some Everclear to do that. And then I'm adding some shine by spraying them with some confectioner's glaze. That's going to harden them a little bit on the outside, and it's going to add some shine to them. And then I just cut out some pink ones. Same cookie cutters with just some pink fondant. Now set those aside to dry. I set those aside to dry for most of the day while I did the rest of the cake. I did that part first, so they had the rest of the day to firm up before I put them on the cake. Now I'm just speeding through the frosting of this cake because there's a lot of details on this cake and it takes some time. But if you want to go back, there's plenty of other videos that I have done that show you the frosting in a little bit slower down version with a little bit more detail. But I am using my American buttercream. And I colored one. This is just the white. And then I did, what did I do? I think I did latte on the bottom from Color Mill. I believe that's the color I used on the bottom. And then I just set those in the refrigerator to firm up, to dry out a little. Not dry out. That's a bad word. For the buttercream to firm up while I worked on the fondant for the top tier. Now I'm doing exactly the same technique for this top tier. I'm just using more fondant and I am cutting it in bigger sections. That's the only difference. Everything else is exactly the same technique. Now don't roll this out too thin or your sections are going to be too small. And I noticed it was still not quite marbled enough, so I twisted it up and rolled it out again. And you can see as I'm going that the marbling is becoming more blended. And that's really kind of what I wanted. And then I folded it a little bit, and then I'm using my little fondant bubble popper, technical term, fondant needle, I think is what it's called, to remove any air bubbles that come when you fold it together like that. And then I used a bigger knife and just cut this in bigger sections, or bigger chunks, like I said. It's really easy to accidentally cut them, just kind of get little cut happy and make the pieces too small, but just kind of don't let yourself do that. And again, adding more food coloring and trying to make sure that my sections are separated. Otherwise, they're going to blend together too much. If you don't get a full coating of that food coloring on all sides of each piece of fondant. And squish that together pretty good, especially for this part, because this is going to need to wrap around your cake, and you don't want your fondant to just fall apart as you're wrapping it. I kind of fought with it a little bit, but I did get it to work. And this one I actually didn't even really set aside for very long. Maybe an hour. And it still worked out pretty good. Now, a lot of cornstarch on your surface. And I just lined them up together, pressed them together, made sure it was long enough, add some more cornstarch on the top, and roll it out. Just make sure your pieces, you don't have straight lines in between where each section meets up to the next one. I was just kind of pushing them together irregularly, so you keep that natural irregular shape. I'm just using my scraper to make sure it's not sticking to the counter too much. And I'm cutting off the excess. I measured how big of a piece I needed by measuring the height and the circumference of the cake. And then I'm taking those offcuts and I'm pressing them together to put on the top, because you're going to need some for the top of the cake also. Now, I would have had better luck. See, isn't that pretty? Would have had better luck if I had let that piece, if I had time to let it set for a little longer, maybe a good hour after it was rolled out. It probably would have not fought me as much, and you'll see what I mean by fought me in a second here. But first, I'm putting that piece on the top, turning it upside down, and that's just a really easy way to cut off your excess with as little struggle as possible. Sprayed it with water, and then this is where I'm picking up the piece and wrapping it around. And you can see it's just kind of wanting to get slouchy, and it's wanting to pull apart a little bit. You kind of learn over time how to have your hands on everything all at once to keep it from falling apart. And you can see right there, it was wanting to separate, but that's okay. You go back in with your smoother and just push it back together, since it doesn't have to be, since it's a natural look. Nothing natural is symmetrical and even. So it didn't matter. I'm just smoothing it out and removing any air bubbles. And then just turn it back over so that it is right side up. Now here for those pink, the pink pieces of fondant that I had cut, I'm using Truly Mad Plastics rose gold. No, this is copper. Truly Mad Plastics copper luster dust mixed with some Everclear. And I airbrush those. When you use that in your airbrush, make sure you thin it out quite a bit. Otherwise, it is going to get stuck in your airbrush. That's my little trick to share on that. So the paint that I'm painting with on the edges of these pieces is a little thicker than what I had used in the airbrush. I'm just edging them all out so that you can see. I don't know. It just makes those pieces pop when you put them on the cake. And make sure that you get all the sides. It's easy to forget one or two. And that's what they look like all done. And I used some boba tea straws to be my support for the cake. I had cut them all to the same height. And then I added a little bit of buttercream and then just plopped that top tier right on. That had been in the refrigerator for about half an hour. That's why I could lift it up like that. And here again, I'm just using the Everclear to remove any extra of the food coloring that would be on the surface. I didn't use any confectioner's glaze on that because, fine for decorations, but I wouldn't put it on the outside of a cake necessarily. I guess I have, but I would suggest if you do that, remove the fondant before you serve it. It's just a little bit more pleasant on the palate. And then I just attach the decorations with some buttercream. Just place them one at a time, kind of look to see how they were going to go together. Plan it out a little in your head if you need to. You can lay it on the counter if you want if you need to have it planned out ahead of time, and then transfer it on the cake. And then I just got this floral swag, I guess. It is different pieces of greenery and flowers they're wood flowers that I had wrapped together with floral tape to make one long strand and just wrapped it around, and I'm using little pieces of floral wire shaped in a U shape to attach them to the cake. Just remember to tell the client they're there. So there it is, all done, guys. I hope you liked it, and I think this would be really pretty in any other color that you want to do, really. But I liked the jade green. I thought it was pretty, and I hope you got something from it. Please like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my video. And if you'd like to watch some other videos, go ahead and click on the link to one of these other videos shown here. And if you would like to check out my other social media, I am on Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Sophisticakes by Mary. And please take the time to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload another video. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next tutorial.